Thank you very much for being with us. We start with the situation in Ukraine and the fear that US funding for the fight against Russia could dry up. As it stands now, aid for Ukraine is currently blocked in Congress. It's reported that President Joe Biden is now prepared to make compromises to get the multi-billion-dollar package voted through. Republicans in Congress are using the issue as leverage to force action on their hot-button topic, border security and immigration. Well, the US has provided some $50 billion in military aid so far to Ukraine's existential fight against Vladimir Putin's troops. Putin, of course, launching that full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022. Well, this Wednesday, President Biden said, "We can't let Putin win."
For the better part of 2 years, the brave people of Ukraine have denied Russia a victory on the battlefield. They've defeated Vladimir Putin's ambition to dominate Ukraine. And the people of the United States can and should take pride. They should take pride that we've enabled Ukraine's success thanks to the steady supply of weapons and ammunition. We provided them together with our partners and our allies.
President Joe Biden, well, the G7 nations met this Wednesday. They met via a video link-up. Volodymyr Zelenskyy was able to join them from Kyiv. He warned that Russia had ramped up pressure on the battlefront and that Moscow was counting on Western unity on Ukraine to collapse in the next year. The G7 end statement is calling for compensation for Ukraine for all the damage that Russia has caused since the invasion was launched in February 2022. And that comes to at least $135 billion US.
Ukraine can defend itself powerfully and repel Russian assaults, achieving necessary results thanks to your support. Russia hopes only for one thing, that next year the free world's consolidation will collapse. Russia believes that America and Europe will show weakness and will not maintain support for Ukraine at the proper level.
Vladimir Zelenskyy speaking a little earlier. Let's bring in Mark Cancian, Senior Advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Thank you for joining us, sir. Should the US continue to back Ukraine? Biden says the G7 is prepared to stay with Ukraine. What's your take on the situation?
Well, the aid package to Ukraine, of course, is hung up in Congress, particularly in the House of Representatives. The Republicans, as we heard, are linking the Ukraine aid to border security. Those negotiations have not gone terribly well, but there's clearly a deal to be made. Republicans want greater security on the border. Democrats want the aid to Ukraine. It's important to note also that aid to Ukraine is quite bipartisan. The Republicans in the Senate are very supportive, and probably about half the Republicans in the House. The difficulty is the mechanics in the House and getting the bill to the floor.
Illustration, though, Mark, that politics is a dirty business, isn't it? Because effectively the Republicans are, I'll use the word, but maybe it's strictly correct, blackmailing Biden over this.
Well, to be fair to the Republicans, they're looking for a deal. Each side gives something to the other, and gets something that's important to them. So we'll see how those negotiations go on.
What would the consequences be for Ukraine? And I think Volodymyr Zelenskyy was just outlining it. But what would the consequences be, in your view, if the US decided to in some way stop or scale down the funding?
Well, if the United States ceased its funding, it would be disastrous for Ukraine. The hope, of course, would be that the Europeans would step up, but it's likely that many other countries, if the United States backed down, would also scale back their contributions. It's not like the aid flow will stop immediately. All of the money has been committed, but some of that money will take months or even years to produce weapons and munitions that will flow to Ukraine. What will happen is that over time, that flow will decline, and that decline will be felt on the front lines. Militaries in combat need a constant flow of weapons and munitions and supplies to replace what they use. And as that dries up, their military capability declines. And within a few weeks, the Ukrainians will probably be unable to do any attacks of their own. And then maybe a month or two after that, will have a hard time defending against the Russians.
Mark, there's a story here in France about a French arms manufacturer supplying assault rifles to Ukraine. The deal is something like $40 million all in all, which may seem a lot to some people, not across the story completely, but when you can consider that is like a tenth, I think, of what the United States has supplied. I think it's something like 40 billion, in excess of 40 billion, 50 billion is something along those lines. And you will correct me, I know, because you're far more accurate on this than I am. Europe hasn't stepped up in that sense, has it? There is this almost consensus across the EU that it should happen and that the support should continue. There are certain elements within the EU now saying, well, we're going to pull this out because we feel closer to Putin. I'm talking about the sort of change of government in Slovakia, the issue with Hungary's far-right government as well. Is the fact of the matter that it really does depend on the US to keep this going?
Well, it really does. Europe needs U.S. leadership. Without the United States, the Europeans tend to mill about. And despite, I think, the hopes of President Macron, for example, to put the unify the Europeans. So it's really important for the United States to step up and continue its aid packages. To be fair to the Europeans, they have provided a lot of aid. They tend to emphasize humanitarian and economic support to the Ukrainian government. When you put all that together, it's really quite substantial, as it should be, because the Europeans together, are wealthy and with very advanced economies.
Mark Cancian, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your analysis with us. I'll just remind people you're a senior advisor at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, but also a retired military man, retired colonel. So you know about the topic at hand, you know about battling, you know about the implications of funding and what that means. Mark, thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your analysis with us here at France 24. Greatly appreciated. Thank you.